Yeah,
So
earlier you asked me like what do the loop shapes mean to me?
Yeah.
So I reflected on that a little bit, and it really feels like childlike or like playful,
Yeah.
and you're getting kind of like that primitive notion of like mark making, but then also like the swimming aspect.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit. And that, what are you feeling when you're doing these loops?
I think, yeah, definitely there is some playfulness in there, but honestly, when I'm in the middle of drawing one of these loops or this long, for these, both of these pieces, they're all on this translucent paper, which I taped together and made this long, I taped them together so they were long, almost like a scroll. And then my goal was to just actually be present, be in that moment with that loop. And then also because I love mark making, how can this mark evolve over time? You know, you can see how, like the ones behind Penny here, you can see how they're evolving and how they're changing and how they're, the other thing I'm looking for when I'm mark making is how I can create a mark that's very, that has integrity to itself. So in other words, it's as if this mark just has always been there. It's not like I worked hard to build it. Like, I want it to look like it has its own life. You know what I mean? As opposed to, I worked really hard to make this cool artistic mark. Those are the ones I kind of discard. I want to just be outside of the process and let the mark emerge and let it have its own integrity. So that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking about. And you asked a second thing that I'm forgetting. Oh,
No,
playfulness. I suppose
it.
there's a certain amount of playfulness in the sense of pushing back on this tome. You
And
know.
Trying to connect the dots between the loops and your swimming, how does that so you're really in the moment. So swimming, you have to be in the moment as well, right? So is that kind of like parallel?
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's also what I was saying earlier about the repetition and the inhale and the exhale and that kind of thing. And there's also another reference for me personally is a long time ago. I was a graphic designer when we did things by hand. And so when you wanted to show a client what a brochure or a poster would look like, you had to make it happen. You had to make it out of colored paper and paint and inks, and you would indicate text by that was, a heading or a body text. You would indicate it by doing two parallel lines and then doing little squiggles that looked like a much cleaner version of this, right? And so that's kind of interesting to me too, because it's almost like it is a language, or it's trying to express something that's beneath language. We can't quite grasp it. And I also had an issue many years ago where I lost hearing in one ear, which I still do not have. And so there's a sense of I always feel like I'm always on that edge of like trying to understand, trying to decipher, and it's I think something that we all have in different ways in our lives, right? Where we're like trying to get it, trying to grok it, trying to grasp it. So that's part of why I'm working with this thing that references language but isn't quite language.
It's interesting that you said graphic design, because it's like now I'm looking at these as like paste up.
Oh yeah.
But it's like totally not like precise.
Yeah.
So it's like you've sort of taken some of that technique but then just freed it up for yourself.
Yeah. I definitely relate. Like I realized that at one point my like Charlie was saying, this is my paint. I work with these materials that I find and that I scavenge. And for me, I feel like the most comfortable way to work is to assemble and construct a collage or construct a painting rather than starting with a blank canvas. And because I don't know what's going to come out it's very like it happens as it happens, as opposed to me drawing sketches in my sketchbook and thinking, okay, this is the image I want to portray. So it's more about assembling these disparate elements and allowing them to be in community with one another. And probably that's little more complicated ones on this back wall, and these are a little simpler in terms of the compositions, but that's kind of what's happening with those things. Yes, Carol?
So Emily, you're following an intuitive line, vision, sense, colors,
Yeah.
shapes, connecting that with your body and what you're doing with breathing and rhythm and momentum and feeling. And I love all the different ways that you view these pieces, these stamps. Beautiful.
Thank you.
I think it's great.
Thank you. Yeah, and these are really, you can see there's sort of almost like a horizon line on all of these, and these were actually inspired by swimming on the East Coast, where there's rocks, and it's a more rocky coastline, and just thinking about, you know, like this one especially, you know, this could be a cloud, but these are more landscape, which is different for me. But this was a series that I did the end of 2024 and into 2025, and so, yeah. Any other? Yes, Valerie.
Can you talk a little bit about the linear aspect of kind of the theme of lines and how where that comes in somewhat in contrast to the intuitive and
The lines, such as like the lines that are those lines that are
and the
blue ones?
threads.
Oh, the thread, yeah.
And even the marks are still, you know, it's very much a line. Like some part of you
Yeah,
did anticipate that it would be a straight line.
yeah. I think with the thread kind of came about because there's ones that are right behind you. A lot of times when I was working with wanting to assemble elements of paper, I found that stitching was a nice way to join them rather than glue. And so that's when thread came in, and then the work like behind Joan, you see those tacks in there and some stitches. I think those came together. The love child was over here, where I used the thread and those tacks. And I feel like the thread, these are also these same encyclopedia pages, the printed pages that I wanted to obscure, again, to kind of push back against that narrative and build my own kind of way of knowing. And then, honestly, the thread was just an element that I thought was a beautiful design element because it contrasted so nicely, because everything else was kind of nuanced and shifting and weather-like, and then the thread to me felt like almost what Carol was saying, like this through line, like this sense of something that's pulling you, that's like your own true north, or that also in terms of watery things might be a buoy line, or might be the way you chart your sailing path, you know, which is right done with straight lines and your ruler or what have you. So that's, and then I really enjoyed how, because I was working on panel, I could nail in to the panel and have the nail pop up a little bit, and to have this nice kind of shadow line that came, which I really enjoyed that aspect of it too, sort of something that's real and something that's kind of this other world underneath it. Yeah. Yes, Christine.
Can you talk a little bit about your palette?
You
That
know,
match your paintings is not unintentional, probably.
What did you say? What's not?
Well, you're in black and gold.
Oh, I know. I didn't put the. I have that blue one. I know this watch band. Is so cool. I know.
You can talk about your palette and your choices and your intentions around that, if there are such.
I did wear these pants on purpose. This I wear like pretty much every day. And yeah, you know, it's. I definitely work more from my gut rather than not the kind of person that sets out a palette and thinks it out beforehand. But I feel like it just came very organically. I really just I'm drawn to this kind of buff color because I've always been drawn, just like I talked about the encyclopedias, I've always been interested in collecting old index cards, old flashcards, you know, the end papers of old books, because they have that beautiful color that's kind of worn and buff and earthy feeling, and then this cerulean blue, I just find it a very uplifting color. It's sometimes the sky, you know, it's really never the water that we swim in. But it's an uplifting color. And then I feel like the black with the sort of more buff color, the black is just so familiar to me from being a graphic designer, from being a printmaker. Ever since I was a kid, I just loved the way black ink set on paper. Just made me, no.